Oh, hello there. Yes, well, we stumble through to the weekend. Yes, the end of my kind of not being at work, but actually feels like I've been at work for the entire week off. Yes, indeed, of course. How foolish of me to choose the job that I did. I should have been something sensible like an estate agent. Yes. Anyway, events of the last few days, particularly yesterday, have inevitably got me thinking about Antonio Gramsci, as you do, and his classic quote. I'm going to quote his classic quote, let's face it. The crisis consists precisely of the fact that the old is dying and the new cannot be born. Into this interregnum, a new great variety of morbid symptoms appear. Yes, and in Gramsci's day, those morbid symptoms were effectively fascism. That's what he was writing about. The historical parallels are not exact, but the crisis, if you like, is still the same. The crisis is the crisis of capitalism. It's an ongoing, never-ending crisis. And the problem with a lot of our political leaders is that they cannot see that basic fact, which is staring them in the face. So we end up with the morbid symptoms, which is this sort of drift into fascism, that most of them, I think, have no real understanding about quite what they're doing. They're flailing around trying to find solutions to the ongoing crisis, and the crisis is the economic system, which is unsustainable, as we well know. And the further we go into this particular century, the more obvious that is. So therefore, they are trapped within their own enigmatic structure in that they themselves cannot see outside of their own particular bubble of their ideology. So, what needs to be done? Well, what needs to be done is what always needs to be done in the crisis of capitalism, which is to get out the boys with the day sticks. And we saw that perfectly yesterday with good old Lee Anderson, who astoundingly went on television. They allow him to go on TV and spout this stuff, and nothing will happen about it because he's a member of the Conservative Party. But let's have a look at this one. Ultimately, we run the country, and if the police aren't doing their job, which they're not, we need to take over. Yes, indeed. You see, I mean, he thinks there that he's talking about Sadiq Khan, but what he's talking about there is this idea that the state, him, who's elected, so obviously they must be exactly right, can simply dictate to the rest of us at any time what they want us to do. And they're allowed to use whatever force they can. I've actually seen phrases yesterday about old-fashioned policing. That's what these people mean. And he went a lot further, of course, because the whole notion that the moment you get into this sort of weird notion that the left have taken over and the Islamists have taken over, then of course you're fully entitled to bring in your own Reichstag decrees. Of course you are, aren't you? So again, Tory MP Lee Anderson discussing Sadiq Khan on GBNews. He's given our capital city away to his mates. Yeah, you'll notice that Lee is the Democrat here, but Sadiq Khan, elected a number of times as mayor, isn't, and his mates. Oh, I wonder who that might be. Is it of people of a particular colour, Lee? Yeah, maybe. I don't actually believe that the Islamists have got control of our country, but what I do believe is they've got control of Khan and they've got control of London. Yes, you see, what's happened there is that an elected person that the people of London want is a bad man, and the people of London have been hoodwinked, no doubt by the media, after all, who are run by... We'll come on to that, of course. And yesterday, even more astoundingly, even for Liz Truss, is this one. Civil service is full of trans activists sabotage my leadership, claims Liz Truss. Yes, she's doing the tour of the states, and brilliantly. Yes, of course. I mean, we can all look at Liz Truss's premiership and see instantaneously that the big problem with it wasn't her desperately unsound ideology in terms of everything from economics to social policy. But what it was, of course, was trans people in the civil service. Well, better root those ones out, better get some confessions. You know, you could have some quotas, couldn't you, whereby, you know, we need to make sure that we're rooting out at least 30 or 40 a week. I'm sure they'll sign confessions after they've been persuaded a little bit, and that way our reality can be maintained through the use of force. Morbid symptoms, indeed, but we will have been proved right, and our worldview, after all, will have been proved right. And the classic example of this yesterday was GBNews. Perhaps they were ambushed, I don't know, maybe that's the phrase, but Michael Walker went on GBNews yesterday and fluttered some feathers, one might say, because he pointed out that their part owner has put up a lot of tweets that might be regarded as a little bit racist one way or another, and of course the GB News host didn't know what to do. The video of that incidentally follows immediately after this one, so do carry on watching that. It's an absolute hoot to see the look of panic on their faces. And what's their answer? Well, their answer is no. Brown people are dangerous, because I'm going to read a long list of all the things bad that brown people have done, presumably ending up with the election of Sadiq Khan, because that's what we really mean. Yes, it's perfectly, it's perfectly fine for these people to be racist because it's true. And oddly yesterday, Mr. Brain Cell himself, Carl Benjamin, got involved, because some of the tweets that this bloke at GB News liked were from Carl Benjamin, and he actually doesn't realise that it's not all about him. So I'm going to quote from him. If you have to explain to people why it matters, it probably doesn't matter that much. Odd that the owner of GB News will retweet me, GB News will platform my tweets, but don't invite me on to discuss them, and then avoid discussing them because I'm not there. No, Carl, that wasn't what was going on, mate. They won't have you on because you are literally a fascist, and everybody knows that you're a fascist, and they can allow the other fascists on to say things that are fascist, or they can allow their usual, proper okay people like Lee to come on, because he's in a position where he can say those things because he's totally safely ensconced within the system, whereas you're not. Now, you can bitch about that as much as you like, mate, but you blew that particular one a long time ago. We know what happens to GB News people when their owner wants to buy the Daily Telegraph. They have to go. Anyway, do carry on watching, because you can see the Michael Walker clip in full. Somebody was having a great deal of fun at other people's expense, and it is a joy to see. Every small victory brings a glow to the heart. Please do have a lovely weekend. Enjoy to the full.
She's been banging this drum for months and months and months, and it's why she was sacked.
Sure, and I think it's a very bad drum to be banging, right? I have a problem with Islamist extremism. I also have a problem with far-right extremism, right? And
well, 90% of suspects on the terror watch list in this country are Islamist extremists.
So 2 MPs have been killed in the past decade, one by a far-right extremist, one by an Islamist extremist. Now, as you've sort of recognised there, I think one problem with Islamist extremism is it has led to more acts of terrorism. My problem with far-right extremism is it has way more access to power. And I have to say, GB News, I think, is an example of this. So there was an exclusive yesterday, actually from Hope Not Hate, sort of showing what tweets
that was a load of
your owner had liked and retweeted. I think it probably is worth reading them out.
Half those tweets, the majority of normal-thinking people in this country agree with.
Let's test it. Let's see what the audience do.
Can I say something? Hope Not Hate as well. They call themselves an anti-extremist organisation. They are some of the most extreme far-left agitators and campaigners.
Let's read the tweets. Let's read the tweets. So these are the ones that your co-owner liked. It is just a matter of time before civil war starts in Europe. The native European population is losing patience with fake refugee invaders. Now, I'm against violent extremism. Warning about a civil war. 7.5% of the British public are Muslims. The vast majority of them, taxpayers, decent people. And he's talking, or he's liking a tweet about a civil war.
Well, yeah,
We've got another one here.
Talking, he like to tweet. These are not tweets that he has written.
Pattern. I'll just read one more. OK. If we want European civilization to survive, we need to not just close the borders, but start mass expulsions immediately. We don't stand a chance unless we start that process very soon.
Do you know what that tweet... Michael, do you know what that tweet was in response to? By the way, Sir Paul Marshall didn't write that. He just retweeted someone else.
Well, this one he retweeted.
And do you know what that tweet was in response to? Do you know?
It was in response to a video of some people in Africa.
It was Ross Kemp interviewing people in Calais who didn't understand the concept of rape. He was trying to ask them, what happens if you rape a woman?
And do you think that's an argument for mass expulsions of people who are already in this country?
Of rapists, yes.
There aren't enough rapists to have mass expulsions of rapists.
That
he is talking about people's ethnic backgrounds.
From a figure on the centre-right was referring to Islamic rapists.
One more tweet. So this is one he did retweet. Pascal's wager in the 21st century. God may or may not be real, but the other side is so passionate, so committed to worshipping Satan, evil, homosexuality and corrupting children that even if God wasn't real, believing in him to fend these demons off is preferable. Now, as a homosexual, I find that somewhat offensive.
Well,
so I think if we are talking about extremism in this country, yes, there are some extremist radical Muslims,
are not here to actually defend
but there is
themselves.
Also a channel which is funded by someone who clearly has very extremist beliefs.
Are not actually here to defend themselves. There is a statement which we will bring people hope, not hate.
I'll read that statement now. So, Sir Paul Marshall,
that statement, Ben.
He said in January 2024. Sorry, no, there we go. That's 1 second.
It's a very divisive ideology, which, I mean, he seems to be endorsing here, and which is so often propounded from this TV station, right?
He seems to be endorsing it. He did not write those tweets themselves. He does have a reply to all this as well.
So his reply is to say that it's, there's lots of stuff on Twitter. It's a small proportion of what he's been tweeting. Hope Not Hate actually said it's not that small a proportion of what he's been tweeting. And I think it's also, I mean, you've got to look here. If this was isolated, if this was
not entitled to an opinion, though? This is what we exist for, to have a broad range of opinion and to not shut people down.
Yeah, well, I mean, so we are having a conversation here about extremism, right? And I think one... always implicit in a conversation about extremism is there is some sort of limit. So you're talking about people who are talking about radical violent Islamism. They should go on the PREVENT programme, right? I also think that people who think there's going to be some civil war between a small ethnic minority and, I mean, here it's talking about the native population. That, to me, is violent extremism or something that
I'll come back to that. Let me just read Sir Paul's statement. He said, Paul Marshall's account is private, but is nonetheless followed by 5,000 people, including many journalists. He posts on a wide variety of subjects, and those cited represent a small and unrepresentative sample of over 5,000 posts. This sample does not represent Sir Paul Marshall's views. As most X/Twitter users know, it can be a fountain of ideas, but some of it is uncertain quality, and all his posts have now been deleted to avoid any further misunderstanding.
I suppose the issue of representativeness as well. So there are, 7.5% of Britain are Muslims. There is a very, very small minority of those who are violent Islamists. And then how much time is spent in papers such as The Telegraph, which, by the way, he wants to buy, on channels such as GBNews, talking about this apparent threat of violent Islamist extremism? There's
plenty of time spent on other papers telling the opposite side of this.
No one's defending Islamist extremism, are they?
So somebody else will write the opposite in The Guardian.
Oh, well, I don't think anyone is in The Guardian saying violent radical Islamism
write the opposite to what she's
the best
saying.
thing. Right, the opposite to what Suella Braverman is saying?
Yes.
Well, the opposite being that we're not heading towards some kind of civil war. They're entitled to their opinion.
You don't have to agree with it. We can discuss it.
They're entitled to their opinion, but I think what we're talking about here is extreme views in society, which are somewhat undermining social cohesion.
Are you saying there's not a problem in this country?
Well, I think there are some radical Islamists in this country,
7-7, Lee Rigby, Sir David Amos, Mike Freer.
I think the idea.
2017, London Bridge 2019, Westminster 2017, Westminster 2020, the Reading attack, Batley Grammar, weekly Hamas sympathetic marches through London, from the river to the sea on Big Ben.
So there are two issues.
People are concerned about the way this country is heading.
There are two issues which need to be separated. There's two issues that need to be separated. So ISIS-style radical terrorism, right? Obviously, absolutely appalling. We need to make sure that the police are clamping down properly on that. The other issue is that there are a lot of Muslims in this country, lots of them very angry about a war going on in Gaza, which I think is perfectly legitimate, who are being smeared as on the same spectrum as the kind of people who carried out the 7-7 bombing. Now, I don't try and say that everyone who voted Brexit, everyone who wants to stop immigration is, of the same type of person as the person who killed Joe Cox, right? So I think we have to be very careful about generalisation. Obviously, violent extremism, a massive problem, but trying to lump a whole ethnic minority in with a tiny minority of violent extremists, I think is very, very dangerous.
OK, Michael, we're going to have to leave it there. And breathe.